Welcome back to Ambivalent Offenders. This is Jamie.
This is Erin.
My voice is sounding slightly less husky, as Matt so nicely put it in a family text. He didn't realize we got Lauren Bacall on our podcast.
We did. Back from the dead. She came back to guest star on our podcast.
Yep. I'm still a little husky, but less husky. So
less sexy.
And maybe I'm more now in the sexy area because like the other one was maybe too husky. This is just husky enough. We're both drinking beverages. Erin's drinking white wine out of a wine glass, which is sophisticated. And I'm drinking a concoction of half Hawaiian punch, half hard seltzer with a splash of vodka in my children's plastic tumbler.
Well, I don't know. You did just say I looked like a Victorian ghost. So I don't think I'm winning the sophistication argument unless a Victorian ghost is sophisticated.
Well, they would be sophisticated drinking white wine from a wine glass. They certainly wouldn't be drinking out of a kid's tumbler Hawaiian punch.
Well, they wouldn't know what Hawaiian punch is.
You don't look like a Victorian ghost because you're wearing the cape, like a shoulder pad cape, heating pad. So it makes it look like one of those ruffles.
I am old and I have backache. So I've got a shoulder pad, back heating pad. So I do look pretty cool. I did turn it on one of my Zoom meetings last week. Well, all right. Do you want to move on to?
No, I don't want to move on.
No, we could just keep going on
I'll
this.
talk 2 hours about Erin's heating pad. So let's move on to just some quick business. Some brief housekeeping. I still haven't chosen my next figure. So if you want to get in on the choice, I will tell you right now, it's tied between P.T. Barnum and Yoko Ono. You can join our Patreon. Remember, we have those 2 levels, $3 a month and $5 a month. Erin's been better at the content posting. I got to be better. I'm going to post some stuff this week. And we have one extra exclusive bonus episode a month. And we gave you guys that one this month for free, which was Bonnie Parker. But the next one is Rasputin. So if you want to do Rasputin, join our Patreon or just generally support us at Buy Me Coffee or review or rate. All of those things are lovely things that we appreciate.
We love reading your guys' reviews and we love seeing new ratings out there.
Yeah. And new listeners. It's always fun to be like,
absolutely,
to have another new listener.
People are listening to our shit.
Welcome. Welcome to the shit show. Who would have known back in the day when we were sitting in a hotel room watching Six Wives of Henry VIII that one day people would want to listen to us blab about history. Mom would be like
appalled.
That's one way to say, yeah. Okay, Erin. So you are now doing your part 2, this part for Jane Boleyn. I'm really excited because now we're moving into our next phase where she's seemingly, I don't know how going to get out of this. I don't really know what becomes of her after.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least haven't read in a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see, because so many women are tied to their men's name, and George Boleyn is obviously also dead, how she's gonna somehow make it back to court.
Yeah. And I think that is a good point, that you might see her or hear about her story in like Anna George saga, but then lose track of her afterwards. But she is integral to the next few wives of Henry VIII. And that's all I'll say for right now. Like you said, we ended last episode after the horrific executions of George and Anne Boleyn in May of 1536. Unfortunately, those will not be the last executions.
I mean, I want to say, unfortunately, but I'm also morbid and I'm like, tell me more.
Tell me more. Oh, shit. Why do we have to sing in every? I think there's like maybe one episode that we don't sing in. I don't know.
It brings. I was gonna attempt to sing, but my voice doesn't allow me. But I don't know. Somehow being on the camera just brings out the singer. I think the only one we no. Did we sing in the Elvis one? I guess I kind of sung Blue Christmas.
I think so.
Good.
I don't know.
I was about to say it would be funny. The only one we didn't sing in was Elvis.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's most of them. But anyway, the dust has cleared and Jane's left alone. In terms of practical next steps, she needed to find a way to live, obviously. Henry VIII took no time in taking an inventory of all of George's possessions and Jane's by extension. Thank you very much. I will have those, please.
Gimme.
Yeah, Henry was not known for his mercy. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of those. We don't get a lot of those stories. And he definitely needed just more stuff. Can I say something with the inventory? Can you imagine how humiliating? I'm just thinking if a king came in and inventoried my wardrobe, like 8,000 lip glosses. Like,
Henry, do you really need my 8,000 lip glosses? Like, he would, though.
Yeah, 50 makeup brushes, one like random screen protector for a device that's unknown. I've seen the guy who has to do the job. He's like, fuck.
Like, there's a lot of crap in this one. Maybe we'll just kind of summarize this.
Let's just speed it up.
Yeah. So he took the inventory, and any debts that were owed to George would go to Henry now, not Jane. So in terms of money, she's not getting any money back that people would have owed George.
Oh.
So everything goes to the crown.
For a minute when you said debts, I thought you were saying any debts that he had.
No.
I was like, oh, that's nice. He's like, forgave her loan.
No, unfortunately, it doesn't go that way. And his death left his estates and positions up for grabs in court. Those don't stay open for long. I don't know how you'll feel about this, but Jane's own father grabbed some of George's estates and stuff. So according to Julia Fox, he received some minor offices in the keepership of the park at King's Hatfield. So yeah, he gets some of those. Maybe I'm a little bit too judgmental.
Maybe. I mean, if anybody's going to get them, it's not like her dad was the one who, her dad's not Henry VIII, obviously. Yeah. So it's like, at least it keeps it in the family,
I guess. But I just feel like there's something sort of icky about him swooping in and taking advantage of his son-in-law's fall.
Yeah, it depends on how you view it. It's like, okay, somebody's going to take this land. It might as well be in our family, or because now she's tied back to her family rather than the Boleyns.
True.
I was going to say, or like you had said, swooping in and right as soon as, while George's head is still warm, swooping in and.
Yeah, and he's certainly not the only one. I just thought that was a little bit weird, and perhaps that's just me with a modern perspective.
Yeah, I can totally see it both ways.
Yeah, and speaking of the Boleyns, Jane now had no choice but to haggle with Thomas Boleyn over her jointure, which is like her prenup. We discussed that. They had that prenup agreement that was drawn up before the wedding. I said we'd get back to the details later. It's later.
This is the time.
Yeah. Thomas didn't really want to hand over the lands that he promised Jane in the document. And he probably really couldn't either, because he had actually promised her lands in the document that his mother was still alive, actually. And she'd go on to outlive Thomas. And
really?
Those lands were his mother's lands too. So he really should not have been able to promise them to Jane when his mom was still alive, because, she'd still have rights to them.
She's going to die soon. So I'll put it in there.
Just kind of sad because she had dementia or something like that, where she was, she was an old
Thomas. He's like, she won't even
know.
You won't even know.
But, it is sad that she outlives all the Boleyns. She outlives obviously Anne and George, and then Elizabeth, Anne's mom, and Thomas. So she outlives them all.
They could say something mean, but I'm like, at least you probably didn't remember the fact.
Well, that is, no, that's not mean. I mean, that's what people say, the benefit of her being, not able, I mean, she wasn't in her right mind, that she didn't have to experience the tragedy of downfall. Yeah. Which is not the case for Thomas and Elizabeth Boleyn, Anne and George's parents, because they both of them are dead within, I think, about 2 years of their downfall. So that you could see that had a big impact on them.
Anyway, back to the jointure. So Thomas Boleyn actually went with an option to give Jane 100 marks a year instead of the land, which wasn't a huge amount, but it's also not pennies. The hard part for Jane was she didn't have kids. She didn't have a kid with George, which is never good for a widow. Childless widows had very little leverage,
but she had a secret weapon.
Oh.
The hottest advisor at Henry's court, Margaret Rylance. Thomas Cromwell.
Oh. I was getting excited. I was like, ooh, tell me more about this hot guy. And then, notice there was not much of a reaction.
Yeah. Well, Thomas Cromwell, he was her secret weapon. She wrote him a letter asking for his help with the king. So she asked Cromwell if the king would return George's stuff and plate, which was, to quote, nothing to be regarded by him, that she would be grateful. So essentially she's saying, he doesn't need it. Give me back my stuff.
Yeah.
Which, fair enough. Again, Henry doesn't need George's stuff.
Yeah.
With the dissolution of the monasteries, he's not strapped for cash.
Mm-hmm. That's another, maybe a little side note for the people who aren't aware of, since now with the Church of England.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
The dissolution of the monasteries.
Yeah. So that was, and I talked a little bit about it in part one. Actually, I didn't talk about it. I talked about it on our Patreon. Never mind. Our mini-sode, I talked about different theories on why Anne Boleyn fell. And one of them is that bad relationship with Cromwell. So during this dissolution of the monasteries, Cromwell was more than happy to get the money of the monasteries and the land and sell it off, make cash money for, for Henry and the court. Yeah. Meanwhile, Anne wanted to use that money for more charitable things. No. Oh, silly woman. We're not going to do that. So that created a lot of tension between the two.
Yeah. So that's your big hottie.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you didn't want to drop the next Wolf Hall coming out.
The plug. Yeah. It's coming out in December. It will cover Jane Seymour and Anne of Cleves, but unfortunately, our man Cromwell doesn't make it to Catherine Howard's reign. So anyway, back to Cromwell. Like I said, she asked him to help get her stuff back from the king. And she also asked his help in terms of that agreement with Thomas Boleyn. She wanted more than those 100 marks.
She's like, work your magic, dude.
Yeah, she asked Cromwell to talk to the king and make him, quote, think more tenderly of her, which I'm I understand why she's saying this, but Henry thinking of somebody tenderly besides himself.
Not so much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think that Cromwell did after getting this letter?
I don't know. It's hard because it's not like she necessarily brings any, like, it's in a way kind of like a dangerous move. It could pay off, but I know if her story continues that she's going to end up back in the court, but it's a risky move because we know Henry's not exactly like the most predictable. And then,
and after the Boleyn's fall, he's pretty much done. People say that he basically destroyed all images and things of Anne, which is not really true. There's still like her emblems and stuff that you can find, but for the most part, he was,
right
over it. He wanted to pretend it never happened.
Right. So having her who was part of like their double date, before
Yeah.
them, that I don't think would necessarily be like his most exciting. So,
Yeah, it's a dangerous prospect for Cromwell to approach Henry about this, but Cromwell did work his magic. This man was a fixer. He never slept.
You're like, yeah, he's a fixer. Fix me.
He would fix me. If there was a man who could fix me, it would be Thomas Cromwell.
We have like a Queer Eye show, but it's just Thomas Cromwell fixing your life.
He would, and he had a soft spot for women and children, like people whose family were executed. He actually was really, really good about that.
I'm proposing that Mark Rylance as Thomas Cromwell has a reality show that's like Queer Eye, but it's for women like us, just us.
What the fuck does that mean?
I mean, I want him to come in and negotiate my contract, like go into the bank and lower my mortgage and just do all.
There is a reason that things fell into disarray after he was executed. And Henry never, ever, ever regretted or said anything about regretting executing anybody but Thomas Cromwell. At some point, he was like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So that is a point. So Cromwell.
So you're just going to go past, you're saying no to the show?
Oh, I'm saying, yeah.
Mark Rylance, if you're out there,
I'm going to pitch it to you. Jamie, would I say no to meeting Mark Rylance? Never.
No. I know, but he has to be in character as Thomas Cromwell. Couldn't be dressed like that.
Jamie, stop. Why are you acting like that would turn me off?
I know.
That turns me on even more.
You didn't extend an invitation, so clearly I have to.
Mark Rylance, love of my life, my crush. Please, sir, can you do a show with us and then fall in love with me and we can run off together? I know you're married and I'm married too, and my husband's listening to this, but it's okay. He knows you're my free pass.
It all works. I feel like last episode we had not very many asides, and now I've already pitched a Queer Eye Thomas Cromwell fixer.
But I also like that I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Why do we need fixing as I'm sitting here in my little cape with...
It'll give you back rubs.
Yeah. So
give you shoulder massages.
I love it. Okay, back to Cromwell. He's working his magic. He even got more money from Thomas Boleyn, despite Thomas complaining that he lived off less than that money when he had a wife and kids.
That's a very man answer.
Is Thomas Boleyn the early modern England's version of a boomer?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. But there was more. Cromwell had done what you would think was the impossible. He had gotten Jane a place back at court. So we know that she had made her way back, and it is through Mr. Thomas Cromwell.
So how long then was she out of court?
I don't think we have a great exact timeline, but it looked like it was about a year.
That's crazy.
Yeah. As unlikely as it would seem to have Jane back at court in the very role that she had before all the executions. She would go, she would be serving Jane Seymour, which was Henry VIII's third queen. And I know now we're going to have two Janes. This always happens in these episodes. I hate it too.
Queen Jane.
Yeah, I'm going to call Jane Seymour Queen Jane to differentiate her from our girl.
I mean, it makes sense because she helped Cromwell. At least, again, we don't,
not to the extent
that's portrayed, but she was willing to talk to him, and again, be a voice. Do we know if she said that she could be a voice inside, like, the women's areas?
No, but that's perfect. That's a perfect segue. So Jane Seymour was engaged or betrothed to Henry VIII the day after Anne's execution. So not even trying to make it look good. But of course, life, at least for the court, would move on, and Queen Jane would need ladies to serve her. this is what I wanted to point out was Julia Fox in her book puts forth a quid pro quo type of agreement that is not far off from what you mentioned and what you see in Wolf Hall. Thomas Cromwell would get Jane a spot as a lady in waiting, and she would be his eyes in all the places a man was unable to go.
There we go.
Yeah, so just for people who might not realize it, this is the early modern period. There are set places in the Queen's quarters that are not open to men, even the courtiers. Ladies only, girls only, men out. Fox's book says, well, we have no concrete evidence that Jane was reinstated as a lady of the bedchamber through Cromwell's machinations. It is certainly likely the bargain would have suited them both. She would be content to be back despite the horrific events she had endured, and he would gain insider knowledge that could be valuable. Yeah. So say what you will about Jane, but girl got herself a good deal. She is back at the heart of things. I mean, she's not the sister-in-law to the Queen, but she is back at court as a lady
within a year. I can't blame her. Or, I mean, even Cromwell. It's like, it does benefit them both.
Yep. And this is another sort of interesting tidbit about that period, and might sort of, I don't want to say this is another reason why she found herself back at court, but it could also play a role. Lord Morley, so Jane Boleyn's father, he actually established a good relationship with Princess Mary, Henry's eldest daughter, by Catherine of Aragon. He seems to have paid a visit to the princess first in early June. So to put this in context, Anne Boleyn was executed on May 19th, so not long after the execution.
It's like, hey,
hello. I mean, they lived close together. Hi, neighbor.
Nope. Yeah, no coincidence. I just wanted to chat. Get to know you more.
And it seems like they became fast friends, which isn't too surprising because they were both very bookish. Probably they're just probably chatted away about nerdy, scholarly things. Yeah. To quote Julia Fox, friendship developed that was to last for many years and involved gifts on both sides. So Mary even became godmother to Jane's nephew and gave 15 shillings to the baby's midwife and nurse.
Wow. So they're really they're friends.
And the friendship would also, as likely as it seems, extend to Jane.
Aaron, with your Instagram magic, can you do like a cute besties video between them?
Yeah, if I can find, I don't know if there's any images of Lord Morley, but I can figure something out.
I'm sure. Work your magic.
Besties. Okay, I'll do it.
I just can't imagine Mary with besties.
I mean, this time she's still relatively young, and despite what you think of her, she really liked to gamble and things like that. She loved gambling.
That's not very Catholic, Mary. I don't know. Maybe it is.
Well, the friendship would also extend to Jane, as I said. So Jane gifted Princess Mary a clock as a New Year's present in 1537. And in turn, Princess Mary bought Jane 12 yards of black satin as a gift, which is very expensive.
I like the satin more than the clock.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, thank you.
We don't really know, like, how close were they, like, close, but, you know,
right.
They're spending time together and payments back and forth. Julia Fox, from the biography that I talked about, she said that we don't know whether it was,
hey, she's daughter of her bestie.
Yeah. Oh, whether it was close or simply politeness. So, yeah, we don't know about that.
And let's just seen like an old dude and
with a 20-something, like a young 20-something.
Yeah, I like see them riding on one of those bikes together. And I don't know.
No, they'd probably be like, I don't know, like translating text from Latin into Greek or something.
I'm still kind of surprised about the gambling thing. I guess they'd always just think of her as that.
No, she was
super Catholic.
No, she had like huge gambling.
Oh, lady.
Yeah. I just find that Princess Mary and Jane Boleyn thing pretty fascinating because we didn't talk about it in the first part, but obviously Anne Boleyn and Princess Mary hated each other. It was not an easy relationship.
Yeah.
So to have Jane Boleyn, someone who was married to a Boleyn, suddenly become friends with Princess Mary is kind of
Right.
curious. So you could kind of give it two ways. Like if you're inclined to think badly of Jane, you could see this as treachery on her part. Oh, like she was always supportive of Mary, and she had served Catherine of Aragon, Mary's mom. So it'd be like, oh, even though she was married to a Boleyn, she really was supporting Mary and Catherine.
Yeah. I don't know. I can see that, just that loyalty of, like, she served her mom for a long time. So
it's not necessarily factions. It's personal, not political.
it gets hard, though, because of the extent of how much Mary disliked Anne. But I think probably there was enough, I don't want to say distance, but kind of like the fact that.
Well, Anne was gone. There was she's not coming
exactly.
back. Yeah.
There's a lot of distance there.
Yeah. And plus, if there was no child from Henry's future marriages, and Mary's still heir apparent. I mean, she's right now, there's only Mary and young Elizabeth. So this is also probably pragmatic to get good with somebody who might be queen.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So back to Queen Jane. So Henry's third wife, she finally got pregnant about 8 months into the marriage.
No, finally.
Yeah. Well, those 8 months must have been really tense for everybody involved, including Queen Jane's ladies in waiting, including our Jane Boleyn.
I can't imagine being a wife of Henry VIII and trying to get pregnant.
Yeah. Well, and he had already was making comments, and even after he had married her, he said some things about, well, maybe I shouldn't have jumped so quickly. Oh, there's some really attractive women at court. Yeah, maybe it was too quick. And you're like, oh, God, that's so Henry. Jane Boleyn had been through all of this before with Anne, too. And so even when the queen was different, her duties remained the same. She would be expected to be in the birthing chamber once Queen Jane went into confinement at Hampton Court, one of Cardinal Wolsey's old palaces that Henry had taken from him when the cardinal fell out of favor. And I should have mentioned this in our first episode about Anne's pregnancy and birth, but confinement took place around a month before a woman gave birth. So it was an all-woman affair. Only women were allowed, no men in the chambers for that entire time.
Of course not.
I'm like, I don't know. That sounds kind of nice. It's like a month-long slumber party is what I'm thinking of it.
Well, yeah, except you're giant and pregnant in that time period, and you're just like, no.
Yeah, I mean, considering the high rate of mortality after childbirth, you might die at the end, but, at least if you party.
Or you had a good month beforehand, no stupid men involved.
Yeah, kind of in.
I mean, confinement, if you just got to lay in bed for a month, that's
basically.
lovely.
Although the downside was, like, even if it was summer out, they'd always have like the windows closed and a fire on and stuff.
Oh, God. Oh, that sounds horrific.
When Queen Jane went into her confinement on September 16th, Jane would have been expected to go with, the outside world would have to wait for another month. We all know, or most of us know what happened next. Queen Jane welcomed a baby boy.
Yeah. Oh, Henry got his boy finally.
Yep, on October 12th, 1537. So,
oh, wait, he shares our birthday.
I don't know. October 12th. Yep.
Oh, not 1988.
No.
Oh, bummer.
But of course, getting an infant from cradle into adulthood was no guarantee at that time, but she still had done what Anne Boleyn had not. And Henry, of course, was elated, and the whole kingdom erupted in celebration. Again, birth of a royal child, it's not just personal, it's political.
Yeah.
She wasn't mentioned as attending Prince Edward's christening, but she was likely there. Considering how long Henry had waited for this moment, I don't think anyone would have wanted to miss it. It was, he had gone all out for the party.
I'm
and
sure.
Yeah, and Princess Elizabeth, who was only 4 at the time, was carried in by Queen Jane Seymour's brother, but he was also assisted by Jane Boleyn's father. So Lord Morley also helped carry Princess Elizabeth in the christening. Jane Boleyn was not the only Boleyn there either. Thomas Boleyn, as a peer, was also in attendance. So we have no details on if Jane Boleyn and Thomas Boleyn spoke or anything. Obviously, nobody's looking at them. Everybody's concentrating on Henry and his son. But I don't know. In my mind, I could just see their eyes meeting across the room, kind of thinking how things would have been different if Elizabeth had been a boy.
I know, which sucks.
Yeah. I mean, I always say, like,
patriarchy.
Yeah, and people always say mean things about Thomas Boleyn not helping Anne and George. But we already talked about in the first one, there's not anything you could do to make Henry change his mind. And I always think of this moment where Thomas was forced to go to the christening of a woman who had replaced his own daughter.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, if anyone has any doubts to how bad Henry VIII is and his capability for cruelty, I'm always like, here, right there, that says it all.
Hey, buddy. Yeah, hey, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be like, I'm really sick. I can't come. I'm sure. He just was rubbing it in.
I'm sure.
My son, who I finally have after. But of course, Queen Jane Seymour's triumph would be short-lived for her, at least. So she'd been sitting up in bed, socializing with visitors, but then she sickened and died 12 days after the birth. Most likely of childbed fever, although there's some other theories put out there, like maybe food poisoning and some other things. But the point is, she died.
What would be childbed fever? Like hemorrhaging?
No, it's because the midwives and the doctors didn't wash their hands before, so you get infection. That's usually what killed women of the time. So, like Elizabeth of York, Henry VIII's mama, and Catherine Parr, who would be Henry VIII's final wife. She died of it. I mean, that was...
Wash your damn hands before you get up in there.
Unfortunately, that's kind of how it went back then. So it was kind of luck of the draw.
I know, it sucks. So it's like you push out the future king and you're celebrating, and like 12 fucking days later,
you
die. Yeah. But obviously, we know on the flip side, Henry doesn't have time to kill you. So you're forever.
Or get sick of you.
Right, exactly. So you're forever this, like nobody can ever live up to you.
Beautiful angel. It does seem, though, like with everybody celebrating Edward, including Henry, people kind of neglected Queen Jane.
She's secondary.
Yeah, Thomas Cromwell actually blamed her ladies, so that would be even Jane, saying that they had suffered her to take cold and eat such things as her fantasy and sickness called for. So they let her just eat stuff, and that she got sick from that. But even Wolf Hall has, which I know is not a primary source, but it has Cromwell blaming Henry for the neglect of Jane post-birth. So that's the point to make.
All of that, probably.
Yeah.
Like, thank you, got the baby.
Basically. And Henry obviously was not at her side when she died, but Jane Boleyn most likely was. And as sad as it would have been on a personal level, this also meant that the women of the Privy Chamber were out of a job after less than 18 months. So only been 18 months of Queen Jane in power, and now Jane Boleyn doesn't have a lady to serve.
Right. So they just hang around until...
Well, first they had the funeral and procession and stuff like that. So
yeah.
And this is actually what really solidifies how far Jane had gotten. Jane was the second woman in the procession for the queen. After the body of the deceased queen, there is Princess Mary. And then Jane was holding Princess Mary's train.
Wow.
Yeah. And to point out, Jane Seymour did have sisters, including, Jane's sister, Elizabeth Seymour, was married to Gregory Cromwell, who is Thomas Cromwell's son. So it's not that the queen didn't have sisters or anything, but that's how, I mean, yeah, you think of how many prominent women were around the queen.
You're like, come on, I wanted to hold that train and that funeral procession. Why couldn't it have been me?
And Jane was also surrounded by figures of her past and present. So her father was there, her brother was there, and of course, Thomas Boleyn was there.
That's the hard part. Is you're in that same social circle. So you're always, I can't imagine always seeing your former father-in-law as a divorced woman. No, thank you.
Everybody was there because it was a big occasion. But then after the funeral, Jane's in this purgatory once again. Henry has no queen for now. So during this time between the queens is actually when Thomas Boleyn reaches out to Jane about jointure again. Julia Fox says that, quote, it was probably confronting his own inescapable mortality that had made Thomas contemplate the future. His wife, Elizabeth Boleyn, had died in April of 1538, so just under 2 years after the two of her kids went to the block. And Thomas seems not to have been in great health. He's in his 60s, which is getting up there for the time.
Right.
And it seemed like he just wanted to get this property dispute stuff settled once and for all. I really like this quote from, again, Julia Fox. And I think it kind of sums up like sort of the difference this time around. Quote, and there was a major difference concerning the negotiations with the Boleyns this time. The very young, immature, and inexperienced girl who had stood at the altar in St. Giles with her bridegroom, her dreams intact, had grown up. And she had grown up in a merciless school.
That's very true. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I've been through shit.
You're going to give me my stuff.
You want to fight me?
It really does seem to have been like every bit as savvy as like her Boleyn in-laws. So that,
I mean, to survive, you having been at court and been friendly with Henry VIII and Anne. So like basically tied to Anne and having your husband executed.
And not just executed, I mean, he's charged with incest.
And the fact that then she is somehow not only survived it, but gets back within a year. I'd be like, yeah, what are you going to do? I'm Thomas Boleyn. Like,
I'm getting my stuff. Right. Yeah, you can do nothing to me at this point. Like, I've already gone through hell.
Right.
Jane seemed to worry that Thomas would die and the whole deal would kind of go up in smoke. What she did actually was extraordinary. This kind of blows my mind. She got a private act of parliament as, quote unquote, an insurance policy. And this is even crazier to think. Henry VIII signed it personally. So after everything that had gone down, the Boleyns only 2 years earlier, like she's getting a private act of parliament about the agreement.
I guess, though, in a way, it's Henry's also, though, kind of sticking it to the Boleyns.
That's true. In the end, she made out really well with the agreement between her and Thomas Boleyn. She got Blickleen Hall, which is one of the Boleyns' most well-known residents, which you can still go today. It's one of the ones that they say is haunted by Anne.
Lovely. I got a haunted palace.
Well, I don't know if it was haunted then, but it looks very lovely. I will say
it's
that.
It's haunted now. I think it was haunted then.
Yeah, and Jane also got 2 manors from the king himself, although this was, again, likely the doing of Thomas Cromwell. Well, we're not giving Henry any credit.
I was going to say, Henry giving...
No, it's our main man, Tommy.
Unless he's trying to sleep with you.
Yeah, it's Tommy, because he was known for taking pity on women, especially those without protectors like Jane. He wasn't a monster.
That's sketchy, though. Sounds like
why?
Like he's using them or something.
I don't think so. But that's not all for people who would help him, like Thomas More's widow, Alice. She wasn't at court. There was nothing that she wasn't spying on him or anything. So
why do you think it was just the kindness? Like, you're biased. I can't ask you. Never mind.
Yeah. It was the kindness of his heart. You have a beautiful heart.
That's what
He
I'm
has, he
saying.
has, he has a beautiful heart and a beautiful
We
soul.
got it. We got it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you could also think, there you go. Jane provided evidence and she helped Thomas and Henry, and now she's getting her reward. So you could think that if you want to kind of discount some of the stuff that we've already talked about. Or you could say that she wanted some of the Boleyn funds, but not George Boleyn. This was kind of her
Yeah.
trade-off. I just want to say, keep in mind that Jane's doing pretty well right now. But once Thomas Boleyn dies in March of 1539, if George had been alive, she would have gotten so much more money, so much more property. Julia Fox says her income would have been more than 4 times what she was living on as a widow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But this does kind of present a choice for Jane. It's sort of like the Bonnie. This is one of the turning points, with her financial situation in much better shape. She didn't really need to go back to court. The excitement of court, and by excitement, I mean danger.
I know. I'm like, nah, I'm going to just chill in my lands.
She'd already served 3 queens. I think I would have counted myself lucky and just surrounded myself with pets at Blickling Hall,
Yeah. Childless cat ladies. I would say just all the cats.
Yeah. I mean, why not? But Jane obviously was not me. It does really seem like she wanted to be in the room where it happened.
Did she have any desire to remarry? I mean, how old is she at this point? Can she still bear children?
Yeah, so she's in her 30s. So, I mean, older for the time, but not impossible. It doesn't really seem like, at least from what we see, that there wasn't really any, at least from what we know, any discussions about her remarrying. I mean, she was kind of tainted in terms of who her husband was and her sister-in-law. And maybe she just didn't want to. At the time, being a widow was actually sort of the best.
Right.
The best deal.
Yeah. You're like, I got all this land and stuff. Like, why would I submit to a man?
I mean, once you did, then you were sort of their property. So this was, now you can own property and
you can own property.
Yeah, you can be property. Yeah. It is just kind of curious that she didn't need to go back to court. But I mean, Julia Fox says like proximity to power was addicting. So we don't really know the reason behind, but I think it is a good guess that she didn't need to serve, but she obviously seemed to like court and want to be at court.
Yeah, I was about to say, it seems like a lot of her life, though, was spent at court.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much since she was 15 or so.
Right. Kind of like, what else am I going to do? And especially with her having, I don't want her say her star in the rise, but she managed to get back to court. So it's almost like, well, why not take advantage of the situation?
Yeah, like she doesn't want to call it quits. We all know that Henry didn't stay single for long. Anne of Cleves was brought over to England to be Henry VIII's 4th bride. So Jane Boleyn was back once again as a lady in waiting.
Long between.
It was actually a couple of years. So
recently.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think. I don't know the exact time, but yeah, it was at least over a year and a half, 2 years, because this one was arguably Henry's first diplomatic marriage. Catherine of Aragon had been arranged by Henry's father, but he also knew her and seems to have had some sort of feelings for her. But, Anne of Cleves, Henry VIII had never met. So
is Cleves like a desirable area to have? Like,
no, kind of. So basically, this marriage match was made by Thomas Cromwell, Tommy. He made it because the family of Cleves was intermarried to these other German duchies. So Cleves weren't Protestant. They weren't Lutheran, but they were related to people that were. It was seen as sort of a political bloc against France and Spain, who were not happy with Henry because of the separation from the Catholic Church.
Okay.
That's how it came about. You also have to think that there's not a lot of women who are eager to marry Henry at this point in his marital career.
Like, sign me up.
This is probably apocryphal, but one of the prospective brides said that she would marry him if she had a second neck.
No.
Yeah.
I want to know if that truly was son. I would love.
I think
to
it
know
was
that
Christina of Denmark, I want to say. But yeah.
We would be besties.
Yeah, that's hilarious. But, being new to England.
Let's toast to her.
I think it is Christina. Here's to you, Christina.
Yeah, Christina.
Yeah, if I had two heads, I would happily put one at the disposal of the King of England. Since Anne was new to England, she didn't really have a set of ladies in waiting who would be there with her. Normally it's like family, that kind of thing. So they were basically chosen for her, hence the need for experienced ladies like Jane.
Would normally, if they were coming from another place, would they bring with them like their ladies?
Yeah, they would. Then sometimes they would stay. Sometimes they would stay for a time. Like Catherine of Aragon, for instance, she had some really loyal ladies, including Maria de Salinas. She married into the English aristocracy and was actually with Catherine at her death. I mean, she was very devoted to her. She's actually the mother of Charles Brandon's 14-year-old second wife, Catherine Willoughby. Usually there was sort of a mix of people coming in from that land and then homegrown talent, just to get them acclimated.
Right.
Yeah. Here's your initiation or your orientation. Which is why, again, you needed ladies like Jane Boleyn who had been there, done that. She could teach them. You can't just have a whole group of newcomers.
Right. You're like, here's where 3 previous queens had lived.
Good luck.
Yep.
There were new people too, including Anne Boleyn's young teenage cousin, Catherine Howard. She had scored a spot at court to be one of Anne of Cleves' ladies in waiting. So initially, she had served alongside Jane Boleyn.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we don't know Catherine Howard's date of birth, but she was likely around 18, 19 years old. And of course, Henry being Henry, solidly in his life crisis years at age 49, wanted the teenage lady in waiting and not the royal bride that the fixer, the man who ran everything, Thomas Cromwell, had secured for him. Tale as old as time.
And also, Catherine, get out of there. Get out of there.
I'm just picturing Elvis saying that she's mature for her age. And Henry VIII is the guy who we picture now, like when you picture in his mind. He's overweight, he's moody, ill-tempered, thanks to an ulcer on his leg that refuses to heal. So not the ideal bridegroom. I think most of us know the story. Anne of Cleves was made to annul the marriage with Henry to make way for Catherine Howard as queen.
And can you remind me how long were they married? Not very long.
Just a couple months, a handful of months. So, and we do know that actually Jane Boleyn, Lady Rochford, she played a role in Anne of Cleves' annulment proceedings. So
by saying there was no action.
Well, yeah. And we know that she knew exactly what to give Henry as the get out of marriage free card.
Right.
It's her and 2 other ladies at the bedchamber. They told the proceedings that Anne had essentially admitted to them that the king and her had not had sex. Basically, they said that Anne said he kissed her goodnight and good morning, and that was it. Yeah.
Truth? Do you think that's true?
No, probably not. I don't know. I mean, there's much debate. There's so much debate about she wouldn't have been really that sheltered. Essentially, they said that's because that comment came out of them teasing her, being like, when are we going to get a baby boy? And she was, and that she had said that. And I doubt that she thought that was what,
right,
how babies were made. What we do know is, Jane's very much involved in the proceedings. And although, can you really blame her? I mean,
no. I mean, again, if you give Henry what he wants.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I just wasn't sure if you were going to be more. I mean, it's
No,
not just her.
yeah, I mean, it's not lovely by any means, but Anne kind of gets the best deal. Like doesn't she get like a nice home and like
Oh,
an
yeah.
allowance? And
She gets Heath Castle, which was another Boleyn residence.
yeah, I'd be like, this is a way better. I'm not going to die in childbirth. I'm not going to be
Mhm.
beheaded.
Oh,
I get-
she outlives all of Henry VIII's wives.
Yeah. Was she her riot? I mean, do we know?
Yeah, she
anything about-
was. I mean, Anne was freaking out, understandably. And despite what you said, where we think that Anne of Cleves was happy to be not married, well, when, spoiler, Catherine Howard dies, Anne of Cleves was actually hoping that he would remarry her. And she was really bummed when he marries Catherine Parr. She even stated that Catherine Parr was less attractive than her, and but she's surprised he chose her. So there is that.
Burn.
Yeah, but
Lady,
yeah.
you don't want to be married to him.
I think it's the prestige, not Henry himself.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess.
Mhm.
Although they did get along really well after the divorce, like they play cards and things. They were kind of like an old married couple, but not
That's
married.
kind of hilarious.
On the face of this, bringing it back to Jane, she's definitely involved in this compared to the Anne and George thing.
Yeah.
And like you said, she knew what Henry wanted and needed from her. I mean,
right.
I'm not really side-eyeing Jane for this, because after Henry executes his own wife, like the veneer of Henry as this courtly Renaissance king was lifted. Like,
Right. They
no.
never had sex, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, they all did what they could to keep their heads in their positions, which they did. I'm not going to blame her for that. So Anna Cleves out, and Jane did not have to wait long for her next position. On July 28th, 1540, which is the same day that Thomas Cromwell was executed, Catherine Howard marries Henry VIII. So you have any doubt on Henry's capability for cruelty, bringing it back around, this is one of the many examples.
Yeah, he's not ever subtle.
No. And the fact that you could celebrate and get married while the man who has done literally everything for you for years is getting beheaded. But this is classic Henry. When he's through with somebody, he was done. He did not look back, whether it's an advisor, a friend, a wife. But we do have to think that Cromwell's death is a change for Jane, because she had relied on him, and now she's really on her own.
I was going to say that for her would be like such a blow.
Yeah, and I mean, she has a dad, but he's not powerful. He's not at court, or not enough to count. Like, he's not Cromwell.
So does he behead him just because of the Anne thing?
The Anne of Cleves thing? Well, the theory is that obviously put him in a bad mood, and then it's more
that's Cromwell's. You put Henry in a bad mood.
Yeah, well, he was upset with him, and then Cromwell's enemies, the conservative faction at court. So Thomas Risley, Stephen Gardiner, these are the conservative guys who are not happy with the Reformation. The Duke of Norfolk, they all use this as a time to pounce on Cromwell. They have not liked him. Like, the Duke of Norfolk thinks he's an upstart, because he comes from nowhere. He's on my list to cover, so we will talk at some point about his background. But he is from Putney. He is not brought up at court. He is about as far from court as you can. So a lot of these guys are just snobs, and they don't like it, because he becomes the Earl of Essex literally right before his downfall. They are more than happy to use Henry being upset with him. And then they basically trump up charges that he was skimming off the top and that kind of thing.
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah.
Yeah. Henry could have saved him, but he was pissed at him because, he didn't like Anne of Cleves. So classic Henry.
which again is funny because then later him and Anne and Cleves are friendly. So it's like, okay, yeah, the marriage didn't work out that he had planned, but they're on good enough terms. It's like, whoops, sorry, bud.
Yeah.
Like,
As you'll see, you'll have a lot of other advisors, but none of them are as competent as Cromwell, at least in terms of like bureaucracy and government. Things do not run as well because Cromwell was tireless. He was a workaholic. He did everything, and Henry would soon learn that replacing him was not easy.
Aaron's like, you're not going to get another Mark Ryland.
He's one of a kind.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Catherine Howard, the new queen. She, compared to all of Henry's wives, she had really little court experience. She had just arrived at court to serve Anne of Cleves. This is all new to her. So it appears that seasoned veteran of court like Jane was exactly the person she needed to guide her. And despite the age difference, Jane's at this point around 36. So by Tutored standards, she could be Catherine's mom.
Yeah, I know. I like that you're like, oh, she's a little elder, old woman guiding and us and our
Catherine's around
35-year-old bones.
Well, if Catherine's around 18, 19, and you think of how young people got married, yeah, she very much could be Catherine's mom. And the two did form what appears to be a really close bond. And we don't know. Maybe that had begun when they both served as ladies in waiting to Anne of Cleves. So maybe it began there. It's hard to say. Jane was Catherine's favorite lady, even above her own sister. So this favoring of Jane by Catherine really does cause some tension within the group and the chambers, as any preferential treatment usually does. So it's a dangerous game being the favorite.
I mean, it makes sense with the being the favorite. Just like anything, if you're the best at something or the most preferred, there's always people who are like, well, I want your position.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to go too far into Catherine Howard's bio, since it's not a Catherine episode, but I know that we do need some background, especially since not every listener knows Catherine's history. And her biography is important to the story going forward. If you want to know more about Catherine Howard, I highly, highly, highly recommend Gareth Russell's biography on her, Young and Damned and Fair. It is chef's kiss, exquisite.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know very much besides the key details of her. And I didn't know how much information was really out there with her being so young. So that would be really interesting to check out.
Yeah, and if you don't want to read the whole thing, he's been a guest on a lot of different podcasts, Talking Tudors podcast, not just the Tudors podcast, talking about Catherine Howard and her biography. I think he does a really good job of fleshing out who she was and some of these other key figures in her story. But back to Catherine, she's a Howard, so they're upper echelon of nobility, not quite as old as some other families, but they're prominent in Tudor times.
They're not, it's not like a minor family rising to prominence.
Yeah, like Jane Seymour, pretty low down on the social status.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. She's like just some minor gentry. She's probably the lowest born of all of Henry's wives. And Catherine Howard was also the first cousin of Anne Boleyn. So Catherine's father and Anne's mother were siblings.
It's kind of weird that Henry would, I guess, one, allow her in the court. And then, like, if I would have found out that they were cousins, I'd have been like, nope.
Well, you have to think everybody was related to everybody at this time.
I
and the
know.
nobility.
I know, but like,
could be swayed by a hot teenager.
It's true, but still, I'd be like, for how much he hated Anne, it's like, you'd think you'd hear Anne's name, like, first cousins, and be like, okay.
Although Catherine was much younger, and we don't think that she might not have even met Anne. It's pretty unlikely. Since Catherine's father was constantly in debt, Catherine had spent much of her youth in her step-grandma's house. And she's not alone. There were like a lot of wards and other young people. And like all young people, they got up to mischief. Yeah, the story goes that Catherine stole the key to the girls' quarter. So the rooms for the girls were locked up at night, and she had it copied so that the young men could come in and join them and mingle and hang out at night. Know what mingling they did.
I was to say, that sounds kind of like millennial, or you know what I mean? Like what you'd see in like teen shows.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And so during this time, Catherine's involved with two men at her step-grandmother's house. There's Henry Mannix and Francis Derham. We won't go into those details. There's a lot of debate about, like, was this sexual abuse and all this stuff, depending on Catherine's age.
Oh,
Gareth
really?
Russell. Yeah, and Gareth Russell does a good job of disputing that. Catherine Howard's reputation has been really bad based on some of this stuff.
I feel like
but
she's portrayed always as kind of like a dim-witted
dumb.
teenager.
Pussy. Yeah. But then there was sort of this bounce back that they had pushed her date of birth enough where it looked like she was like 13 or something with these men. But from what we can tell, like I said, Gareth Russell's biography's one of her newer ones, and it seems like they were a lot closer in age than previously thought. So these Henry Mannix and Francis Derham, again, not going to go into details about them, but what you should know is that there was some level of sexual intimacy with Francis Derham.
Okay. Confirmed.
Yeah, from testimony later on from people who were in those rooms. You have to think so.
This is like makeout rooms in the 90s or something. Like
yeah,
like a house
basically.
party.
I mean, it's just a bunch of beds in this area. And one of the girls talks about they're kind of getting up to things, and she just gets out of because she was sharing a bed with gets out of bed, and it's like,
yeah,
no.
Yep, I would definitely get out of bed. I mean, you think of a classic, like you're sharing like a bunk bed, but like in the same bed.
Yeah. His beds were expensive.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to this stuff later, but yeah. So she was not the quote unquote rose without a thorn that Henry thought she was. So anyway, I just want to kind of put it in perspective that sex before marriage, it's obviously frowned upon by the church, but yeah, people don't always listen to that. There's quite a bit of evidence that people of all statuses did.
Right.
Sex outside of marriage and outside of that.
Well, and even Anne was pregnant when they, I guess, well, we can talk about it when we get there.
We'll talk about the problems of that.
So did he really think that all his previous wives were virgins?
He did. Yeah. Whether or not that was true, who knows?
This is all new. I've never experienced this.
Yeah. But, I mean, the problem is that when you're a woman who catches Henry's eye and you've had sex outside of marriage, that's going to lead to a problem. And the problem is also in Francis Derham himself. So he spoke of marriage to Catherine, and she kind of went along with it just for his sake, like, whatever, yeah, we'll get married. But it's clear Catherine, she wasn't going to marry him. Like, she had no, she was not even like, oh, she wanted to, but they're much different statuses. But she seems to have broke things off with him, Francis Derham, before she went to court.
Yeah.
Like, he was very much the kind of guy who does not take no for an answer. Gareth Russell, in his Sublime interviews, he always calls like Derham a narcissist. He had love bombed Catherine, and he just could not take it. And she broke things off with him. Yeah, girls, we know.
I know. I'm like, this story could fit in like nowadays. They're sneaking out. She's having sex as a teenager, and then she's like, yeah, of course. Yeah, we're gonna be together forever. Yeah, and then okay, now I'm going off to quote unquote college. I was gonna say, yeah,
exactly. When she gets to court, Catherine Howard does find herself involved somewhat with this young courtier of Henry's privy chamber named Thomas Culpeper. So Culpeper, he was very attractive. Even Jane Boleyn would admit his attractiveness later. He's what the youths would call a fuck boy.
No.
Yeah. He seems to have broken it off after Catherine wouldn't put out, and she was really heartbroken. Like, there's actually records of her breaking down and crying afterwards.
Oh. They were just making out, or?
Yeah, and he left her for another woman who would put out. So she was really upset.
Men never change.
Remember the name Thomas Culpeper, though. He's going to pop up again.
I know.
But no matter, I mean, soon she's queen. So there's no more young men to break her heart. Just old Henry. If you want to hear more about Catherine's side of the story and more about this, Young and Damned and Fair by Gareth Russell, or one of his many interviews. He's just a master at storytelling. So he really, puts us all in
We get it, Aaron. You love him.
I do. We all wish that we could tell stories like Gareth, but
Hashtag love Gareth.
uh-huh.
You just want him to follow you on TikTok.
I would love, oh my God. I would freak out. Anyway, Catherine Howard's queenship was off to a decent start following her wedding. She really did impress the court, and she was obviously this jewel at the side of an aging king. There was some tension with Henry's daughter, the Princess Mary, but that's expected when daddy marries a teenager who's close to your age.
Yeah, I'll just say, probably still happens, you know. But I can definitely imagine Catherine Howard. That's one way to feel even more attractive and like a jewel, be beside this aging, overweight, full serve king. And you're like, yeah, I do. I'm extra beautiful.
Yeah, and she was said to be really attractive, but that would definitely make you look extra attractive. You think of Jane Boleyn at this time. She's the favorite of the queen. The queen is really, Henry's really in love with her. She probably felt really secure, and for the first time in a while. Obviously, Catherine Howard hadn't fallen pregnant yet, but there was still time, and she was, still really young.
Right. The chances of her, it's going to be high.
Yeah. And so now in the summer of 1541, the king and queen and their retinue, Jane included, they're off on a 4-month progress up north. So for those wondering, a progress is essentially just a trip around parts of the kingdom. They'd stay with the nobility along the way, let people see their king, all that stuff.
Quick question. So at this point, they've been married how long?
That would be a year, because they were married in summer of 1540. So it's about a year in.
A little surprising that she's not pregnant.
Well, depending on,
I guess, Henry.
There is questions, because there was questions in terms of with the Anne of Cleves thing. Henry protested that he couldn't have sex with her. Like she was just too unattractive, and he didn't like her, and he couldn't do it, and talked about his wet dreams to prove that he could still get it up. Even since Anne Boleyn, remember, she mentioned to Jane Boleyn about Henry's possible issues in bed. So who knows? But things were good for this progress. But of course, pride goes before a fall. Like what had started off with such promise for Jane, she had clawed her way back. Despite losing George, despite losing Anne, despite going through 3 more of Henry's queens, it would all soon end in a nightmare.
Yikes.
There were some murmurings and rumors that might have thrown Queen Catherine off balance. There was an ongoing rumor that Henry wanted to divorce his wife and perhaps remarry Anne of Cleves.
No, that's not going to happen.
No, ambassadors noted how Henry was always all over Catherine Howard in public. Poor girl.
Gross.
Yeah. Like just groping your wife. Yeah. Actually, Catherine was worried enough that she went to talk to Henry about it.
Yeah.
I love his response. He was basically like, no, honey, and said that even if he did marry again, he would never retake Anne.
Thanks. Super reassuring.
What now? Why are you talking about remarrying when you're married to me?
Henry always knows exactly what to say.
What to say? He does. He has that ability just to put women at ease.
I'd be an anxious wreck if I was
Well,
married
yeah,
to
and that's
Henry.
kind of what Catherine, at this point, she is getting really nervous because she knew that her security really lived and died by her biology if she was able to give the king another son. Sons died all the time. Henry was a second son. You know, he had a son. He was happy about that, but he needed more, essentially.
Right. It's that happy medium. You need a few sons,
Just
but not
enough.
too many sons.
Not Edward III level sons.
Right. Because then you have them fighting, and because men are men.
I'm going to say Edward III, and you're not going to yell at him this time. Every time I mention him, you yell at him.
On her deathbed.
Thank you. I can't believe I had to prompt you for that.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I guess it is a running thing now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll never forgive him.
You'll never forgive him. I don't think Philippa did either, so we'll say that.
Now you're getting me worked up.
Now you're worked up.
No.
The end started simply enough, as these things do. So we're going to go backwards. Rewind a few months before the progress. Jane had been mostly sitting in the background up until now. Well, now she's getting in on the action, and it would lead to her downfall. Jane Boleyn arranged back in April a meeting between Catherine Howard and Thomas Culpeper. I told you he'd come up again.
Don't do that, Jane. Why would you do that? Why?
Well, who knows? I mean, the Queen probably told her to.
In a way, don't say no to the Queen, or maybe she feels so comfortable in her position that she...
Yeah, I'll kind of talk through some of that in a bit, but they're not meeting alone. There was Jane's there and another woman, Catherine Tilney. She was one of those childhood friends of Catherine's who had been at her step-grandma's house.
And then they start making out on the couch right next to them, and they're like, there's like that in the bed.
Yeah, no, not yet. Well, so Catherine,
not yet.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Catherine, she just invited him to her chambers, and she was giving him a cap, a hat. She was giving out presents to people, and she obviously was thinking about him, and she gave him a hat. Culpeper, being the flirt that he was, reportedly said, "Madam, why did you not this when you were a maid?" So basically, like, why didn't you give me presents when you were still unmarried? And Catherine Howard replied, "Is this all the thanks you give me for the cap? If I had known you would have these words, you should never have had it." So, point Catherine. Yeah, she's like, "That's all you're going to say to me? If that's it, then why did I give you this present?" Translation. So, ouch. And despite her saying this, Catherine and Culpeper continued to be fascinated by each other. About early June, Jane Boleyn became the go-between once again and uses an usher to get a message to Thomas Culpeper. He had been sick, so Catherine Howard sent food for the next few days. And at this point, it could still be explained away. No one's necessarily doing anything wrong at this time.
Right. It could be just seen as a nice gesture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the progress, though, it was clear Catherine Howard was not through with Thomas Culpeper. Gifts and messages had become commonplace, often at the hands of our girl Jane. She was always the one who was delivering the messages and such. So there's no mistaking Jane's role in this. Mm-hmm. The two women seemed to egg each other on in a way, talking about Culpeper. "He's so dreamy. Oh my God, did you see him today? So hot."
They were transfixed by him.
Yeah. We know this from interviews after the, again, centuries-old spoiler, arrest. Thomas Culpeper and Queen Catherine Howard later did their best to put the blame on Jane. They would say that Jane urged them on and kept the affair or whatever it was going.
Man.
Yeah, she didn't squash it, but what was she going to do? Tell the Queen to quit it?
Right. No, hands. Like.
She's really in an impossible situation at this point. On the progress, so we're still on the progress, they stop at Grimsthorpe, which is the home of Henry VIII's BFF, Charles Brandon, who I think I already mentioned a bit in this young wife, who was a lady in waiting too.
Young. Yeah. Well, young.
Very young. Yeah, very young. Well, originally she was his ward and was supposed to marry his son. And was supposed to marry his son, and then his wife died. His wife was Henry VIII's sister. And so once his Henry VIII's sister died, he decided, I'll just marry the kid and myself.
Gross. Don't like that at all. It's like a Woody Allen, close to a Woody Allen situation.
Pretty much.
But even worse, because he married her when she was actually
really young. Yeah. So we're on progress. They're stopped at this house. And once there, it's up to Jane to arrange the meeting between Culpeper and Catherine Howard. So you could explain away everything else, but right now they're all passing the Rubicon here. There's debate what happened during these nighttime meetings, and you can believe what you want on that. But regardless, this was dangerous. And the more it went on, the more suspicion was cast upon them. What we know is that on this progress is Jane's job to basically scout out places that Culpeper and Catherine Howard could meet. Yeah. We know that's what she did. So she was arranging the very thing that got her sister-in-law killed. Just kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, like, does she have such a, what's the word? Like, when you survive so much that, invincibility, like, that she's like, okay, I got out of this before. Like, the queen's telling me this, like, what else am I going to do?
I was going to talk about this later, but yeah, let's get into it. At least with Catherine and Thomas Culpeper doing it, at least on Catherine's side, it seemed like she was in love. Culpeper, who knows? You know, obviously he might have had other reasons, but with Jane, it kind of boggles the mind. This is the reason that always has drawn me towards her.
Yeah.
It makes me want to pull my hair out thinking that she did this. So my theories that I have was, one is that Henry was really sick, and there was even a thought that he was going to die during this time. So maybe they thought that he was going to die, and then making alliances with the queen, you know, she'd be the dowager queen, so that ensured Jane's position. Then I think the only other thing to talk about is, like, what choice did she have? She was there to serve the queen. Julia Fox talks about in her book that there's just no way that Jane could go to Henry directly and tell him what was going on. In the past, maybe she would have used Thomas Cromwell and kind of used him as a go-between if she didn't want to be involved with this, but he was already gone at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Cromwell.
Yeah, and even if she could tell Henry, it's going to be her word against Catherine Howard's. Who do you think he's going to believe?
Yeah. She would go to the block before Catherine Howard would.
Yeah, and then, you know, just once she did it, she's kind of stuck.
Doing it.
If you've done it once, then you're already screwed.
The classic, if you give a mouse a cookie,
then you're screwed.
They're going to want a glass of milk.
Yeah, there's another Julia Fox quote that I think's really good about that, when it said, and once she, Jane, had decided to take that first message and that message became a part of a series, Jane had passed the point of no return.
Right. It's almost, to me, like when Clyde, with the first murder, even though Clyde didn't commit it, but he was tied to it, it's like, well, now you're wanted as a murderer. You're for sure going back to prison, if not facing, well, then after the second one, it's like, now for sure, no life sentence, you're going to the chair.
Yeah. I do want to make it clear, though, that there are other less charitable options. One of the biographers called her a pathological meddler. And then other people suggested that she was vicariously living through Catherine Howard. So could be any of those, none of them. We could spend the rest of this episode trying to untangle it. Again, it's one of the things that's always fascinated me. And, you know, that she had escaped the black ones. Surely she knew the consequences if this was found out. Well, let's go back to the progress because there's more. After visiting the city of Lincoln, the royal retinue stops once again to spend the night at a nearby palace.
How far north are they going? Are they going into Scotland or not?
No, they wouldn't be going all the way up there. There's actually some problems brewing up there at the moment during this time.
Problems in Scotland?
Yeah, shocker. So they're staying at a nearby palace. Jane Boleyn, she's been given a room at the top of this flight of stairs from Catherine Howard's, which isn't unusual as ladies in waitings. They need access to the queen. To quote Julia Fox again, Catherine's announcement that she wanted a late night chat in those rooms was distinctly odd. Members of the royal family did not call on anybody, which is true. Like, who are you going to be chatting with at night?
Right. You don't have telephones.
You don't call on people. People call on you, and not at that hour.
Okay. Have an important meeting to do.
No. Yeah. Well, Catherine dismisses two of her ladies in waiting. Catherine Tilney was the childhood friend, and Margaret Morton, before going into Jane's room. And that's where she waits for Thomas Culpeper. Jane and Catherine almost get caught at this point because a guardsman had seen the unlocked door and he had gone to relock it. They were able to get out of view of the guardsman, but it still boggles my mind that they went through with the plan after this when they got that close to being discovered.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
I want to give Catherine the benefit of the doubt because of her youth.
I know
she has agency over actions, but Jane,
I know that's why I'm getting like, I guess I just can't understand. That sounds like what an 18-year-old would do.
Mm-hmm. But Jane, you know better,
right? Who thinks she's, untouchable. She's a queen of being
invincible. Mm-hmm. Again, frontal lobe.
Mm-hmm.
Culpeper picks the lock, sexy, before moving to another room. So then the lovebirds, they chat away, and apparently Jane dozes off, which would be me sitting in the corner taking a quick cat nap.
Right.
So they were talking until about 2 or 3 in the morning, which again, this is where I sympathize with Jane being the 36-year-old. Having to keep up with these 20-somethings.
Yeah, I would be definitely sleeping.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to sleep. I can't keep up with you guys. Again, it's really late, so it's enough to draw suspicion. Margaret Morton, one of those ladies who I talked about earlier who led Catherine to Jane's room, she's just sitting there fuming, wondering where the queen was, because I think she really doesn't want to go to bed or can't go to bed without the queen.
Okay.
And she's also not a fan of Jane Boleyn. I'm sure that played into it too. Like, what are they up to? Mm-hmm. She even went to see if the queen was still up with Jane. When she comes back, the other lady in waiting, Catherine Tilney, is also tired of waiting. She goes, Jesus, is not the queen abed yet? And Morton said, yes, even now. So they're like, what? How is she not in bed?
Right.
I told you that the favoritism that Catherine showed Jane would come back to bite them both. So they're not happy being edged out by Jane. And they notice the increased closeness. And during this time, Jane and Catherine are kind of passing these cryptic notes to each other about things. And of course, they don't know what's going on, but they know something's going on.
Like a middle school friendship group. You're like, well, Jane and Catherine are passing notes. Mm-hmm. Like, are they talking about us? Or like, why are we not part of this?
I'm sure they're upset with that. And if you think that like that close call with the guardsman would have made them more cautious, you would be wrong, because the very next day, Catherine sends a dress to Bess Harvey, who's one of Thomas Culpeper's conquests, who they had been talking about that night. She was teasing him about it. And Jane delivers an apparently innuendo heavy note to Thomas Culpeper to quote, tell him about the dress which the queen claimed she gifted to save Thomas's reputation for having allowed his tenement to be so ill repaired. So she's like, ha ha, I'm giving dress to your girl because you're not giving her enough stuff, that kind of thing. A little joke between them.
Sassy. I mean, I like teasing.
Well, it would be cute. It'd be cute, except for
If you weren't married to the king of England.
Thomas isn't a great guy. There's kind of some suggestion. We don't know if it was him because confusingly, he had a brother named Thomas Culpeper. So annoying. But one of them was accused of rape a little bit before this and had gotten off. So it's either Thomas Culpeper, this guy, was accused of rape, or he helped his brother get off on a charge. So he's not the most upstanding citizen. We'll just say that.
But again, teenage girl was like,
oh, yeah, he's bad boy.
bad boy, yeah.
So that night, what do you think happened? Do you think they decided to lay off, or do you think they went for
or
no?
Young and dumb.
Except for this time, Catherine Tilney, that other lady in waiting, sat outside the door with Jane Boleyn's maid. So while Jane and Catherine, they basically lock the door to Jane's room and then go meet up with Thomas Culpeper elsewhere. And we know at this meeting that these lovebirds declared their love for each other. And Culpeper said he did love her again above all other creatures. And he kissed Catherine's hand. Which is bad. This is bad.
Yeah.
This is starting to get really bad. Again, you can excuse the gifts, the meetings, everything that was happening before was sketchy, but now this is approaching treason. This is treason for Catherine. If things couldn't get worse while this affair is underway, another complication arrives in the form of Catherine Howard's old beau, Francis Darrow.
No.
Yeah.
He drove back up.
He's a narcissist who is not happy about Catherine breaking things off. Well, he'd been in Ireland, then he came back, and then he had resorted to some light blackmail with Jane's step-grandmother to keep the story of Catherine and Francis's sexual relationship way back a secret.
Quiet.
So he was blackmailing them.
Lovely.
Yeah, it's
Always how you start a love story.
It's just so stupid. Like, again, Gareth Russell in his biography talks about the stupidity of Francis leaving the safety of Ireland to put himself back because he rides. He gets kicked out of Catherine's step-grandmother's house and he rides to Catherine. And this sends Catherine into full-blown panic. You know, it's the last thing she needs, and she doesn't want him to start blabbing.
Right. Which he's obviously going to if he's stupid enough to come there.
She's basically blackmailed into giving him a spot in her service. So she says, okay, you're a gentleman usher. Ugh. This would not end well for any of them. It's just dumb, dumb, dumb. He put himself there.
I know.
Well, again, Gareth Russell thinks that he's very jealous and possessive and just, yeah, obviously all that trumped everything.
He knew Catherine was married to the King of England. I get it in one way if she was married to just like some nobleman. But like,
no, but
she's married to the fucking King of England, who is not known for his mercy.
No, especially now.
He old, he grumpy, he's got an ulcer.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to take any shit from, like, I don't get what would possess him to think that.
I think people should listen to some of Gareth Russell's interviews. He kind of explains how he sees the mentality of Francis Darrow because it is, clueless, just like you are clueless. But if you think this development stopped Jane from organizing more meetings with Thomas Culpeper, you'd be wrong. They were up to their old tricks. So even after the progress ended, Catherine's mind seemed to be only on Thomas Culpeper.
I kind of hate everybody, though.
Well, Wednesday, November 2nd would be the day that everything fell apart for the Queen and for Jane. So Henry arrives at his chapel to pray. Just a normal day. What was unusual was that he was given a letter by Archbishop Cranmer. And Cranmer said that he had not the heart to tell it by word of mouth, hence the letter. Coward.
I don't want to be in the room to tell you this.
Basically. He knew Henry.
It's like telling bad news in an email.
It is very much
Yet
that.
I do not have the ability to have a hard conversation with you in person.
Well, Cranmer had got into Henry's orbit because of the Boleyns. He was close to the Boleyns, and he was also close with Cromwell, and they all had fallen. So I think he's just trying to stay out of harm's way at this point. It basically informs Henry that his wife might not have been so innocent the day that he married her. Finally, at long last, her past has caught up with her. An investigation would be launched at once. So at this point, the investigation's only about what happened before Catherine Howard was queen. So at her step-grandmother's house. They don't know about Culpeper or anything.
Sure. It's all, pre-marriage.
Pre-marriage, yeah. Catherine Howard and Jane and all the ladies, they have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. All the while, Henry's men are gathering this swath of evidence about Catherine Howard's life before she married the king. And they're just hanging out. So when Henry finally received additional information from his counselors that, again, Catherine Howard was not, in fact, likely a virgin when she married him, Henry did what Henry did best. He bolted without a goodbye to Catherine Howard. He's the king of ghosting. Again, we saw him do this to Catherine of Aragon, to Wolsey, to Anne Boleyn, to Cromwell. And now the time had come for Catherine Howard.
Yeah, like I'm not going to have a hard conversation. I'm just going to order you.
Doesn't say goodbye. He just gets out of Dodge, so to speak. And even if it hadn't gotten out what the cause, so Henry just, bolts from the palace. So people knew that. And, the king usually doesn't just leave out of nowhere.
Something's wrong, yeah.
Yeah, there's murmurings, but nobody knew why. I can imagine for Catherine and Jane, you're starting to get a little bit worried because, you've done some things.
I'd be like pouring in sweat.
Yeah. I know,
I'd be so sweaty.
My hands are kind of sweaty. I get sweaty palms.
Now I'm like, oh, fuck.
Then Archbishop Cranmer came for the queen. So what Catherine should have done at this point is admit that Durham and her were pledged to be married. I mean, we don't know what would have gone down if she had just admitted that. The marriage would have been annulled. She'd be ruined, but she might have survived. But she denies it. And of course, they would soon stumble upon much more damning information about what happened on that summer progress.
Yeah.
So, for some reason, it was actually Catherine Howard herself that brought up Thomas Culpeper's name.
What?
Yeah.
Girl, what you doing?
Obviously, she's a nervous wreck. She's not savvy. Russell talks about in his book, the Archbishop Cranmer has a pretty good reputation, but this is an unsavory part of his chapter because he basically lets her just talk until, he could have been like, no. Yep. You settle down and that kind of thing. But she basically says something about Durham being jealous of Thomas Culpeper, but he shouldn't. And they're like, why did you mention him? They find a letter. It's from when he was sick, I believe. And she signs it off as long as life endures. So that doesn't seem like a platonic letter.
No, I don't say that to my friends.
Yeah. And now it was Jane Boleyn's turn to be interviewed. There's so many interviews and statements about these events. I can't go into them all. And again, if you can read the books because all this stuff exists. So you can basically read all these people. They talk to people from Catherine Howard's youth and then talk to the ladies in waiting here. So we know a lot. This is where all this is coming from.
And all the girls, I'm sure, give her up.
And we know that Jane promised to be torn with wild horses rather than give up Catherine Howard. Well, it was not quite true. As I said before, Catherine and Thomas, they both put the blame on Jane. Catherine basically said it was all her fault. She was egging me on, essentially, telling me this, and then Culpepper blamed the two women together. Eye roll, of course.
Yeah.
It was the ladies.
They seduced me. I didn't even want to go.
I'm surprised he didn't say, oh, they were witches. Come on, throw that in. They were saying Jane pushed Catherine towards Thomas. She was the one organizing the meetings and apparently had said no to chaperoning them closer during their midnight meetings. Whatever. Whether this is true, it's up to your interpretation and how you view Jane. If you think she's that meddler or living vicariously through Catherine, maybe she did. Maybe she was egging them on and making this into a full-blown affair. During her questioning, Jane essentially claims, I kind of slept through all the meetings, so she wasn't quite sure what went on.
That'd be my answer. I'd be like,
yeah.
I mean, it was like
It
2
was
in the morning.
2, yeah.
Oh,
She did say that she thought that Culpepper has known the Queen carnally. And there is a debate about, did they sleep together? Did they not? Culpepper does tell the counselors, including Edward Seymour, who is Jane Seymour's brother.
Mhm.
He's one of Henry's chief advisors. So Culpepper says he intended and meant to do ill with the Queen, and that likewise the Queen was so minded with him. So they wanted to, but they didn't. And then Edward Seymour retorts, that is already too much. True.
yeah.
Like we said, Jane certainly thought they did sleep together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the situation gets bleak from the time Jane's arrested. If you thought this was going to have a happy ending, what story have you been listening to?
Log off now. Oh,
Mhm.
see you later.
So it does seem that Jane went, to use a terminology that they used at the time, mad after she got arrested. 3 days into her jailing, I'm going to quote, she was seized with a fit of madness by which her brain is affected. Honestly, that would have broke me. I can only imagine the stress.
Yeah, it was a young girl realizing now your dumb actions have caught up with you.
Yeah. Well, this is Jane, not Catherine.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
But
But
still, your invincibility has caught up with you, especially through all of it. I think like
almost finally got you.
It's almost like a dam then like being let out. I survived all of this and now
Now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she went downhill, and the insidious nature of Henry continues when you realize he sends his own physicians to Jane daily only so that he can execute her, as by law you weren't allowed to execute someone who was quote unquote mad.
Oh, so he was waiting till she was not mad.
Yeah, she gets taken out of the tower for this purpose to be nursed like a lamb to slaughter.
What was she showing as madness?
I don't really say. I mean, Catherine Howard, too, stopped eating and obviously was freaking out. They don't, at least in the books, they didn't go into evidence. It just said seized with a fit of madness by which her brain is affected. That's all we really know. She just broke. This is one of those times when researching history where the humanity really jumps out of you. It kind of just takes the breath away. Kind of put yourself in their shoes. She was no fool. Jane knew what was, that's why, she knew what was going to happen. She had seen this all before.
I think that's what would be. I think that's what would be like the dam, like all this emotion or kind of that protective shield where she had been. So
she kept it all to herself.
Right. Because she was like, I came out. I'm stronger for it, all this stuff. And then suddenly it's like, she has no, I don't want to say rose colored glass. She knows who Henry is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he certainly hasn't improved in the years. And she knows what it means.
Yeah. It's not quite like Anne Boleyn thought that she could go to a nunnery.
Right.
It seems like Cranmer basically had promised her that if she had signed a thing that they weren't married, that she could go away and go to a nunnery. But obviously that was not to be. This Jane had no such illusions of that. Henry was so furious and angry. He reportedly asked for a sword so he could kill Catherine Howard himself. He was so worked up over this.
I'm sure. I'm sure at this point.
But he's been embarrassed. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the thing is, with men, what do they do when they get embarrassed? They kill you.
Right. Well, and especially after, I'm sure it brought back all these things of Anne,
Mm-hmm.
even though most likely the Anne stuff wasn't true.
No, but I think in his mind, he convinced himself that it was.
Oh, of course. That's how he justifies.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise,
going
he's a
off
murderer.
Right. That's how he justifies it. And so it's like, how dare like this girl basically think she can be smarter than me?
Yeah. Well, did Jane heal? Not really. So Henry actually did pass a law to execute her. So he had to pass a law in order to execute somebody who had gone mad. An act of attainder, not a trial, was how Jane Boleyn and Catherine Howard were given their death sentences. So they did not have a trial. Actually, Catherine Howard had requested that because I think she thought maybe she could throw herself at the feet of her husband.
Yeah, what does that mean? So if you didn't have a trial, what did they have?
It's like an act of parliament.
Oh,
So they're sentenced to death by an act of attainder, which is before parliament.
so they don't hear any evidence
Nope.
or anything like that. It's just like,
Mm-mm. Jane was referred to in parliament as that bawd, the lady Jane Rochford.
Mm.
Not good. By the way, we're going to talk about her execution because she does get executed. Francis Derham and Thomas Culpeper were also executed. So
Yeah.
they didn't escape either.
no,
Um,
surprising. That
Jane-
what?
Derham.
Garham. He seems like a Gareth. I just want to call him Gareth.
Well, Gareth Russell's the biographers. That's
I
not
know.
what we're doing it.
Sorry, I'm just like,
Damn
seriously?
you.
Yeah.
I don't really feel bad for him.
No, I mean, he ends up getting executed himself. It's like, really? Like, that's what
It
you...
was like a suicide mission.
Pretty much. But I feel like as a stupid man, he thought he could, like, it was like true love.
You should listen to some of the stuff about him because it will be very illuminating on his
I
character.
want to know this dude more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vitals my
Well,
life.
Jane was executed on February 13th, 1542. She's about 37 years old. Catherine Howard was executed before her. So Jane likely would have heard the crowd before going to her own death. And then she had to lay her head on that same block.
So it's the
So it
same
would've been-
day.
Yeah, same bloody block right after. Boom, boom. We know Jane gave a basic speech despite the fact that she kind of lost her mind. She does seem to have went as gracefully as possible. She made her speech, laid her head down. And 6 years after the bloody days of May that took down the Boleyns, Jane met a similar end. I did want to talk about, in the home stretch, the afterlife of Jane, because I think it seems as cruel as like those last weeks of her life. I mean, I talked about how we got to the idea that Jane betrayed George and Anne, which is, the origin of her myth as the infamous Lady Rochford, quote unquote. According to Julia Fox, the source of this appears to be John Fox, who in 1576, so a while after Jane's death, he had a note in his margins about Jane creating a fake letter that was used against both George and Anne. So Fox is really well read. It's his Acts and Monuments is like all about Protestant martyrs. And it was, especially during Elizabeth's reign, it was one of those popular books about martyrs. The story about like Catherine Parr pleading for her life from Henry VIII is in there. So that's
Parr?
Yeah, when like Henry is thinking about executing her because he thinks that, knows that she's got Protestant leanings.
Oh, I guess I it's been so long. I didn't realize.
Yeah, there's like the story that he's thinking about it, and that conservative faction, the same people who brought about Cromwell's downfall, literally the same people.
Mm.
Gardner and Risley, they even come to arrest her, supposedly. And she's in the gardens with Henry, and she had thrown herself at his feet and been like, I'm sorry. Like, because he was angry because she was debating theology with him, and he didn't want to debate theology with a woman. And she threw herself down and was like, I'm just a woman. I was just looking to learn from you. And so then when the men come to arrest her, Henry, like, kicks them and is like, get away. What are you doing? So,
I never asked for this.
Yeah. So that's one of the stories in there. But so we have that. And then later in Queen Elizabeth's reign, George Wyatt writes this biography about Anne Boleyn, and he talks about Jane as a wicked wife, accuser of her own husband, even to the seeking of his own blood. So we're starting to see that myth develop. It's all about the redemption of Anne Boleyn. So yeah, there's just, again, we've already talked, there's not much to substantiate her role in bringing down Anne Boleyn. Of course, once she's a convicted traitor for helping Catherine Howard, she's the ideal scapegoat. It seemed you could believe that she was involved.
Then you trace it back and you're like, well, this probably wasn't the first time.
Yeah. So I think we've arrived at the judgment piece.
Okay. Well, you have to go first.
I know. Oh, this is hard. I'm going 70-30 positive.
Okay. Why?
So I think like the main crux of the argument is that we know that Jane's not actually involved in the downfall of her husband and her sister-in-law. So we can throw that one out. Don't think about that. I'm just trying to think of what is she guilty of. Obviously, this is where you're like really forced into an impossible situation with Catherine Howard and Thomas Culpeper. I mean, for me, I just don't know how she could have gotten out of it without losing her role at court, running foul of Henry VIII, who was, he was the tyrant that we think of, that we all know and love to hate. Maybe earlier in his life he would have shown mercy, but not at this point. She really is just collateral damage. I know Catherine Howard and Culpeper, they try to throw her under the bus, but one, I'm not going to take the words of a terrified teenager at face value. And I think that Catherine was in as horrible a position as Jane. I'm not trying to talk bad about her either.
Right.
Yeah. So no one can know what would have happened with all this. I find it easier to say the Queen wanted her to deliver a message. She had to deliver the message. There wasn't any way around it. And then she got stuck in the cycle. I mean, maybe she talked to Catherine about how attractive and stuff he was, but that's like, I don't know. That's girl talk. I think that there's excuses for that. If she really was guilty with the Anne and George thing, it would be much harder to discount that and to like her, but that's kind of where I'm at. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of was bouncing around, but I think my final judgment would be 80-20 positive.
Oh, so you're even higher than me.
I guess what I'm thinking is,
yeah, maybe I would be 80-20 too. Or I don't know.
Because as you said, if we discount the Boleyn, like more myth than anything, I can see in the same way that Thomas Boleyn was so limited in what he could actually do, Jane was even more limited as the wife. Mm-hmm. And that idea of your husband being accused of incest with the Queen, his sister, like there's pretty much nothing you can do except, again, maybe give Cromwell some, not like a lot, but
yeah. Well, there's just that. I mean, again, it's so ridiculous, the incest thing, that it is almost like he wants them dead. There's nothing you can do. If he's accusing George of incest, that just shows the absurdity of it all.
Right. So if she is pushing the other way and being like, no, this is ridiculous. That's her own death. And I think the fact that she was able to come back to court and have this the full, I don't want to say full life because she died. So yeah, it's like our age. But she
The
had
career
this,
woman.
she had the second chance at court, and it seemed like that was where she liked to be, and she wasn't pushed into marriage. I like that she was like, hey, I have my estates, I have my money, like I'm not
My job.
Yep. And
Career woman.
I think if anything, Catherine Howard would be also obviously a good one to do.
Yeah, I would love to go more into depth, and actually, it would be fun. Like maybe you should read Young and Damned and Fair and do it. I'd be curious about your perspective, like what you would get out of it versus what I would.
Yeah. I mean, because that's where it comes down to is I feel like you said, Jane was in an impossible situation. No matter who was queen, she was going to follow what the queen said.
Yeah, that's what you're there for.
Right.
That's your job.
And she had been, I guess, quote unquote, lucky enough that she was with queens before, like Catherine of Aragon and Jane Seymour. And, I'm not really going to count Anne, but nobody had asked her to do what Catherine had. And so I can't imagine her saying no. And then, like you said, once you
do that,
once you give a mouse a cookie, but it's just that, okay, now she sees you as a trusted individual, which I'm sure feels good. And
she kind of has blackmail over you.
Right. It's like you've done it once. So now you're
in it, babe.
Exactly. So it's like, oh, I really didn't think that, maybe not have thought it through or didn't think to the extent. And then now, I'm in it. If I back out, she has information on me or somebody else is going to take the place and then tell on me. I think she was in just an impossible situation as a lady in waiting and then she was definitely collateral damage. Of course, Culpeper and even Catherine Howard, she's a young girl. She's trying to save her own head. Like she's going to blame Jane.
Oh, yeah, she's terrified. I mean, she's just as terrified, and she is freaking out to the same extent that Jane Boleyn is.
You're like, what can I say to possibly get some mercy on me? And so you're just
or at least just get to that next day or not get out of this questioning. I think we see, you don't just see it in this case, you see it in so many other cases, crime cases are like, it wasn't me, it was them. It was them. They they had the gun, they shot them, not me. I don't blame anything that went on during the questioning.
I do feel for her because if we do give her I don't want to say benefit of the doubt, but if we do give her the sympathy of the Boleyn situation, like that she wasn't trying to get her husband killed and Anne killed, that when she is suddenly now in the same position, like in going mad, I understand why that would be so beyond traumatizing, not because just that her death is likely, but that it's like bringing up all these
feelings and
suppressed or not. Like
there was not therapy, and we talked about how quickly she got back at court. That could not have been easy, even if you thought that she was not a fan of her husband or anything. We talked about that in the first part, but even if she wasn't in love with him and she kind of rebounded, that's still a trauma.
100%. There's no way you go through that, especially with the time that she spent with her, George, and Henry. Like, and the fact that Henry is the one who's doing this to you. It's basically like who you thought of as a brother-in-law for a long time and a trusted individual is now not even willing to talk to you. You already know his MO. You know that you're not going to convince him. Yeah. Maybe Catherine.
Oh, yeah. Like there is a scenario, I guess, that Catherine gets to go off to a nunnery Well, I guess there's not nunneries anymore. That's the thing, is the monasteries are dissolved. But she gets to go off somewhere and exile, basically. But you're stuck there, but this is also why it's funny. Like, there's no way that anybody even believed the Anne Boleyn thing, because, again, no ladies in waiting and stuff were tried with her. You needed that because you always had those women around. So the fact that there wasn't a Jane Boleyn helping you and involved in that, it just shows what bullshit it was.
Yeah, just though wants me to shake Catherine Howard, not because, I mean, of course, obviously all these sexist laws and not treason, but she couldn't have known before she was married. But
but I do think it started innocently enough, and then, like anything, it kind of just spirals.
especially with somebody as sexy and hot as Thomas Culpepper supposedly was.
And the book and stuff they talk about. Some people make this into like a Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers. Gareth Russell talks about how it's like, Culpepper seems sketchy, and people can be in love just because they had a tragic end doesn't mean that he was like a worthy love of her.
Right. I mean, she's young. It's like, how many people have these super intense feelings for somebody of like love, but that doesn't mean it's a healthy and love of your life. It's just big feelings.
That's how you feel. Yeah. All right. It was a long one, but we did it. We made it through.
So, well, it'll be short once we cut out all the bullshit of me and my ice breaks. Anyway, all right. Thank you, Erin. That was a very engaging. As I said, I really only knew of her through the Anne Boleyn saga. So to see her in the Catherine Howard one, I'm definitely interested in checking out that book. So maybe Gareth wants to follow us on the Instagram or listen to our podcast.
Well, I'll put some of the recommendations on our Instagram in the story or something if you want to see, so that you can access some of that, because I do think it's worth checking out and getting some more of that Catherine Howard side of you.
I love it. I mean, I didn't love the story. It's tragic, but it was a very interesting one, and one that I think I'll still think about and wonder, because there's so much we don't know. So I guess if there's an afterlife and I die and she's as scheming and meddling as everybody thought, I'd be like, God damn it, I gave you an 80-20. Like, that's a very generous score.
And you hope that you can come down and haunt the shit out of somebody and just say,
oh,
I take it back.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate everybody listening and engaging in our content. And we love to have more listener responses. If you have a different opinion, maybe you're like, no, Jane Boleyn is totally like 50-50 or a 60-40. As I said, send us an email. You can do a voice memo that we can play. Or if you don't want to share your voice, you can just type up your opinion and we can read it. Or another great option is to join our Patreon. We also have like kind of a message board on there, so you could debate other Patreon members about your opinion and other ways to support. If you can tell one family or friend about our podcast, we really, really appreciate that, especially as a small little fledgling newish, What, we're like, how old? Newly. We're like,
I don't know.
2 months old. We're 2 months old. We're not even
Yes.
crawling yet. Yeah, we're not even crawling yet. So any support, whether, as we said, it's a review or joining a Patreon or buy me a coffee, is very appreciated. And we will be back next to finally, I promise, finish the saga of Bonnie Parker. Not much left.
Yeah.
And last thing too, if you want to have a say in my next person Erin already has a clue on hers on the Instagram, on the gram of who she's doing. But I have not decided, and I will be deciding, I don't know, in the next few days. So now's your chance. Right now, as I said, it's a tie between Yoko Ono and P.T. Barnum. So if you join the Patreon, you can vote and hopefully have a say on that. Yay. Thanks for judging with us. As always, we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.